This is another episode of Truth, Love, and Liberty. I have Lisa Ekman here. She used to be a former Democrat political advocate, and now she found the light and is come to
help wake people up. So I was a Democratic advocate and lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for over 20 years. I bled blue. I believed government was the answer, and put all my faith and trust in the government to keep me safe and all the things that Democrats do. I was the president of the Law Democrats at Georgetown, just to give you a sense of how deep in it I was. I worked for Senator Ted Kennedy for a while, worked for an appointee in the Clinton administration, and was really, really tried and true Democrat. You know, you would hear me say things like, vote blue no matter who, which is a very cult-like phrase to utter, because it does matter who, it matters why. And so I was totally in that space when COVID hit. And COVID woke me up to remind me that I was a classical liberal in my heart. I valued freedom. I valued our Constitution. And I just wasn't on board with all of the hating of America that was going on and all of the shaming of people for certain things like being a patriot or loving your country. But it was really the government's response to COVID. And when they decided that they had the power to ignore all of our God-given rights that are enshrined in our First Amendment. And I think it's important to remember for everyone listening or watching that the First Amendment doesn't just protect our freedom of speech. It protects our freedom of assembly and our freedom of association and our freedom to worship where and when we please. And every one of those rights was under attack during that time. And when you can get thousands of people together to protest something, but you can't see your dying relative in the hospital, you can't have your Thanksgiving dinner with your family, and you can't go to your church to worship, that's a problem, you know. But what really happened is my fiance, who was my boyfriend at the time, he did not buy the COVID narrative at all from the beginning, and I did. We were fighting all the time. As you might imagine, it's very hard to have people living in two completely different realities come to agreement about much. So we were having a particularly heated discussion one day. And like so many people who in the conservative circles, in the independent thinking circles do, he said, oh, do your own research. Prove me wrong, prove me wrong. Go do your own research. But he also asked me a question that really stopped my brain, literally broke my brain, we say, and then I had to rebuild my brain. And that question was, because I said something to him something like this. I said, Jamie, I can't believe my government would do this to us, do this to the American people, do this to the world without data and evidence. I just can't believe it. And he said to me, Lisa, if they'll poison our water, what won't they do? And I already knew they were poisoning our water. I filtered my water. I never drank tap water. I know that the fluoride, poisons, it damages IQ and calcifies our pineal gland. And you hear that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is talking about getting rid of fluoride in the water. Thank goodness. Finally. But it's not just the fluoride, it's the chlorine, it's all the chemicals. It's the fact that what we're drinking has remnants of most of the prescription drugs the other people in our community are taking. So I know this. And our bodies are made up of 70% water. Every cell in our body has water. So if they'll poison something that will hurt every cell in our body, my brain couldn't think its way out of, despite how programmed, indoctrinated, and brainwashed I was, that got through. And it stopped my brain. And so I told him, you know what? I will go research myself. And I did. And then I started going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole and was led to the truth.
That's amazing. And that takes courage. And did you go through like a dark night of the soul? Like when your reality shatters, I feel like you go through, I don't know, for me, it was like a period of like 2 weeks where it's just like your reality is shattered. You're like, everything I thought was true, is a lie. The media is lying. And your whole trust in these organizations is just like shattered. So what was that like for you?
So, yours getting over yours in a couple of weeks. I envy that because mine lasted a couple of years,
wow.
actually. But I think, you have to understand that was politics was my whole life.
Yeah.
And not only so, the very first line in the prologue, by the way, of the book I wrote,
Yeah.
which is called Deprogramming Democrats. You can see it here, and Uneducating the Elite: How I Escaped the Progressive Cult.
Nice.
Is admitting you're wrong is never easy. Admitting you're wrong about everything is next to impossible. And so it took quite a while for me to sort of rebuild my brain, rebuild my confidence, rebuild my ability to have any faith in myself, because I'm significantly older than you are. So I have been fooled for a lot longer than you had. And knowing that you spent your whole life um, wrong about just about everything. And not only that, I was going around the country and not just DC, shooting my mouth off about how right I was about everything. And I was really an expert in my field. So to go from that to I've been and to go from that and to also go from feeling like you're doing things to help people to knowing that you are doing what a tantamount equals evil, supporting evil goals and
Oh, yeah.
building government and um, it's a hard thing to come to terms with.
I feel like a lot of teachers are, on the forefront of that. They're indoctrinated to indoctrinate others, and then they don't even want to acknowledge the evil that they've, been a part of and perpetrated. I mean, that's hard to accept for people.
I don't think they know they have.
Right.
And so there's a whole chapter in the book on education, because I think there's two main tools that they use to indoctrinate and brainwash and program. The first one is the education system, which I call an indoctrination system in this country. And then it's through the control of information. So propaganda and censorship, whether that be on mainstream media or in television and news programming.
Yeah.
And so, but in education, 90% of teachers, professors are Democrats and left leaning, often very progressive.
Very, yeah.
And so, what kids are learning is all indoctrination. It's all the way I kind of describe it is if you have all left professors, they're probably going to teach you almost all left theories with maybe one conservative theory thrown in that maybe they make fun of or tear down. And certainly, back when I went to school, you could probably still get a good grade, even if you didn't agree with the teacher, maybe not the best grade. But I don't think that's true anymore. There's no tolerance for differences of opinion in schools. On top of that, in universities now, professors have to give trigger warnings for any content that might offend, upset, or trigger someone. And so of that combined with free speech zones, safe spaces, which I think anyone can get a safe space as long as you're not white and male, or maybe just white, I don't know. And the policing of microaggressions, which don't get me started on what a microaggression is, because it makes no sense. It means I have a right to be offended about anything I want to be offended about, regardless of whether you intended or is in reality offensive or discriminatory. So between all of that, what we end up with is young people who are unable to face any difference of opinion. They don't know how to deal with conflicts, and they don't know how to appropriately have a difference of opinion with someone without calling them names or resorting to canceling.
Right.
And that's why you see the cancel culture that we have is all of the young people coming out of school never being exposed to a difference of opinion or having to, I think this is the biggest one, having to defend their own opinions through logic and facts. It's all through emotional.
For sure, for sure. And so what do you think is going to be the solution for that? Like, how do we start to awaken? Because I see the way it's going right now, we have the wind behind our sails. We are the dominant force right now. Conservatism is like, there's a swing back of the pendulum. People have seen, we've been on the brink of destruction, seeing these ideologies play out. We've seen the fruit of this indoctrination system on our children. It's all being exposed. And now how do we start to help wake up more people to this? What do you think are the keys to do that?
So there's a few keys. The first one I would say is lead with love. Okay. So you're never going to convince someone by yelling at them. You're never going to convince someone by being mean to them. So that isn't, and it's hard because they may attack you, but lead with love and kindness.
Yeah.
Start from a perception of, I think there's a few things to keep in mind. People on the left and the people who are brainwashed in the progressive cult are very, by and large, compassionate people. But it's that very compassion that has been manipulated and weaponized using fear into anger. So the first thing to recognize is that these people are in their core very afraid. A lot of this comes from any lack of faith and connection to the creator, because when you accept creator's love in your heart, you accept God's love, fear, how many times in the Bible does it say, do not be afraid, fear not?
Yeah.
When you let fear in, you let evil in. You are not living, but so I say, remember that it's all fear based. They are controlled by fear. So when you awaken them, it's an extremely scary thing, because I think a speaker yesterday was talking about we all need to, hold ourselves to account and be accountable and responsible for ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, when you place your faith, when you worship the government and idolize the expert, which is what members of the cult do, you're placing your faith in them.
Yeah.
And when you lose faith in them and you don't have faith in God, you are alone. You are truly by yourself. So recognize that it's fear, and and just because the boogeyman they're being told to be afraid of isn't real doesn't mean the fear isn't.
Right.
And so starting from that place that they're afraid, so don't make them more afraid, and don't push them with attacks or that kind of thing. Try to access their true compassion.
Okay.
Try to take the compassion and turn it around. And I'll use the example of gender ideology and what's happening to children. They truly feel that they're doing the right thing by supporting some child to take hormones that will irreparably alter their body chemistry without any studies that have been done to show what the long-term effects of that are. They truly believe that if they don't get gender affirming care, they may commit suicide. So the facts on that are clearly on the side of that's not true.
Right.
It's more likely, actually, after 10 years post surgery, that someone will be suicidal than if they did not get surgery. And in my opinion, at the base of it, we have a severe mental health situation in crisis in our country with both youth and adults. And that's what we really ought to be talking about, is why are so many children they so reject their own themselves that they want to fundamentally alter their body in this way.
And I think that comes down to a lot of like the chemicals in the water, in the food, the poisons. And what's interesting is like Lupron and these other chemical castration drugs are ending up back in our water supplies and poisoning the rest of us. So if they're going to get 1% of the population taking these drugs and urinating them into our water supply, you can imagine that this epidemic is going to get even worse and even worse.
It definitely won't get better. That's for sure. So we know all that to be facts. But the other thing that the left has done, and the people pushing for a communist revolution, because I think we're at the end stages of a cultural revolution for its communism in this country. Had Trump not won, we might found ourselves down that slippery slope without a way to get back.
Right.
So thankfully we are not in that position. But that doesn't mean our country still isn't at risk. Is that they have created a monopoly on knowledge in the minds of people who have been indoctrinated into the cult. So if you are a leftist, a member of the cult, you hear them say, well, what are your credentials all the time, right? So only somebody with a degree or a government credential will they believe.
And that's a logical fallacy. Argument from authority.
Correct. But they will only accept authority. And so the very first thing you have to understand is you shouldn't try to tell them anything. I know it's hard. You have all these facts. You know what's true. You just want to shake them and go, listen, these are the facts. Okay. But what you need to do is ask them questions. Socratic mind. And it can be painful and it can be slow. It takes patience. And the hardest part of it is that you need to ask them questions that don't presuppose an answer. Okay. Because then you are telling them something. So I'll give you an example with the with the gender ideology, and I will use the example of a person, a man who believes he is a woman wanting to use the girl's changing. So it's like, okay, um, I do care about him, but I also, well, what would you say to the girls who don't want to be in a locker room with someone who has a penis?
Right.
I would put it that blunt, that because that's the facts.
Yeah.
And the bathroom is a harder argument in some ways because you're in a stall and then they try to get around it that way. But in the locker room, everybody's naked. If in my youth, if any man wanted to get in the locker room and expose his penis to young girls or any boy, he would be in jail or juvie or appropriately constantly,
Right.
So that's the question. It's not about he's a bad boy, but why does what he thinks mean more than all these other girls?
I mean, we've just reached a level of cultural insanity that's just beyond right now.
And we have, but and that's what you're trying to. So one of the other characteristics of people on the left that I think is important to keep in mind is that they seem to be able to hold a much greater deal of cognitive dissonance than independent thinkers or people on the right. I'm not saying that people on the right aren't hypocritical. There's lots of hypocrites on both sides. And I don't like to call it sides either because I think it's a continuum, but also it is the establishment. It's two wings of the same bird, so to speak. But it's more the people who are conservative or have free minds and think is that they tend to base most of their opinions and policy positions on principles.
Yeah.
So limited government is a good example.
Free speech.
Free speech, and it's absolute. If it's free
sure.
speech for me, it's free speech for thee. And a lot of it is grounded in religious principle too. It is grounded in the Ten Commandments. It's grounded in the Golden Rule. It's grounded in those types of things. The left does not have that, and what do they say? Those who stand for nothing will fall for anything.
Yeah.
But essentially, because positions are grounded in principle, it's harder to hold conflicting positions because you're still always going back to that foundational principle to guide those decisions. When you don't have that, it becomes easy to say, well, on the one hand, I think I should be able to say whatever I want and tell you what you need to say, but you better shut up. You can't do that if you have a foundation of principle that says speech has to be free.
Yeah.
So the idea with these questions is also to push the cognitive dissonance to the point that the brain breaks. And it can't hold those two positions anymore. And so in the example I just gave, you keep asking questions till you get to a point where in all likelihood they may call your name, because what happens is, and it's funny, but you push them to a point where the reptilian survival brain in their subconscious knows that you are about to threaten their reality. The house of cards is about to fall.
Wow.
The sweater is about to unravel. So they lash out because you're about to force them to actually think.
Wow.
And so take it as a badge of honor when they call you a name. Don't take it personally. It is literally life or death for their reality, and their mind is trying to shut you down so that it protects. And I mean, from the survival perspective, you can understand.
Yeah.
The subconscious doesn't know it's in a false reality. It knows that that's reality. And so when you threaten that, it's very scary to the subconscious. So take it as a badge of honor and know that you kind of got through. You got through at least enough that you planted a seed. And the hard part is you may never see that seed germinate yourself, but you may come back and find a person 6 months later that has a whole garden of truth growing now because you planted that one seed.
Amazing, amazing, amazing that you brought that up. I never really thought of it that way. I kind of vaguely saw it that way, but I've experienced that before.
Have
I've
you?
experienced that before, yeah, where people could actually act out violently. They could lash out. They feel threatened, and it's illogical in one sense. You're just talking to someone, but it could happen.
But if your whole reality is based on a series of lies, and if pulling one of those lies will crumble your whole reality, um, it's like you're trying to protect your sanity in some ways. And I will tell you that for about maybe 3 or 4 months after I first really started looking for and finding the truth, I thought I was having a schizophrenic break. I thought I was going crazy because I was like, everything I've ever been taught, told, read tells me that what I'm believing now is false. It's not true. It's not real. And so it takes a lot of work to get past that and a lot of strength to, be willing to put yourself through it.
So what's a good message to people who are on the other side of it, who are, maybe in illusion? How would you encourage them to be open their minds to be able to change themselves, and to see things more clearly?
So I think it really does help to have someone that you trust ask you some questions like we were talking about. I think the first thing to know, another thing I think is important to know is that people on the left need external validation. Okay. They need to know that they're good people. They get that from other people on the left. And in the environment of cancel culture that we're in, being ostracized from the left is about the scariest thing that someone on the left can have because they get all of their self-esteem and their validation from that community. Again, no relationship with God because God gives you your love and acceptance, right?
No.
And if you don't have that, you need it from somewhere. You need connection, you need acceptance. So if you don't have it from God, you need it from his community. So taking a position that is the opposite of whatever the cult is very scary and hard. And I think that one thing I would say to anyone who is like has some questions starting to wake up is trust yourself, love yourself, know that you're good and you're enough, and let go of caring what other people think about you so much that it negatively impacts you and locks your brain, basically. And it's a hard thing because I laughed. I used to laugh a lot when I see on social media people on the left who they do not think for themselves, constantly saying, "Oh, well, there's no critical thinking skills on the right." And I always want to say, when did critical thinking become just accepting anything your government and the media told you without asking any questions?
Right,
You know?
right.
And and that's the second thing is give yourself permission to ask questions. Know that you're out of school, you're not being graded. No one can tell you what your worth is besides you. And be willing to question what the authorities are telling you and question what your friends are telling you. And know that um despite everything you see, hear, and read, people on the right are extremely loving, caring, welcoming people as long as you're not calling them names, like, and putting them down. I think that's the other thing that's really hard is that people on the left do believe in many ways they're better. They're smarter, they're better because they are constantly told that over and over again. And so, like, you feel like you may feel like you're lowering yourself, but you're actually not. You're elevating yourself, freeing yourself. And as hard as the whole process was, the hardest thing I ever did, I lost all my friends, but I have so many new ones that I've met at places like this, and I lost and some family members I don't talk to anymore. As hard as that seems, it's so worth it.
Yeah.
There's nothing like having a free mind that allows you the freedom to have your own thoughts, beliefs, um and shedding the fear.
Yeah.
Living in fear is a miserable way to live because the way I try to put it for people is that in a non sort of religious way, is that unless something scary has actually happened to you at at that very moment, you're living in a situation that does not exist, and you've just lost the present precious moment that you're in. Fear only exists in the future, and sadness, unless something sad is happening to you right at this moment, only exists in the past, and you lose the present. And happiness can only exist in the present. So allow yourself to be happy, reject the fear of the future, reject the grievances and the sadness of the past, and live in the moment.
Yeah.
And if you want to put it in a more biblical sense, God gave you this moment to live in. And when you are fearful of the future, you're first of all aren't carrying his love in your heart, because love and fear can't exist in your heart at the same time. And you're rejecting the gift of this moment that he gave. So take the gift of this moment and reject fear. And once you reject fear, you see all the tricks they use to keep you fearful. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And living a life guided by love and not fear is an amazingly freeing experience.
For sure. And when you come on the other journey and you start to awaken to the truth, it may seem dark like for a second, but actually it's so bright and we see the path forward and things are going in an amazingly beautiful direction. There's no fear to be had when you're walking with God and you're walking on the right path. So there is light on the other side of that, that moments to go through.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I mean, it is very, very dark in many ways when you first wake up. There are a lot of really unpleasant truths that are hidden from us. But hiding our head in the sands and living in the sand and living a life of fear doesn't change that reality. All it means is that we do not allow ourselves a true, happy life of love and joy.
Amazing. Do you have any last words of encouragement for those who are, maybe on the left that, to encourage them to step forward and consider something different?
Yeah, just don't be afraid. Just know that you are loved and that there is a community out here that will support you in a way and doesn't want to control what you think, what you say, what you wear, and that you will be accepted for who you are and what you truly want to believe, not what you have been programmed and pressured into believing.
Amazing.
And if you don't mind, if I can give one more shout out.
Yeah. Where they can find you and where they can find the book.
So you can find the book on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble. And it is Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites. And you can find out more information at my website, deprogrammingdemocrats.com. And you can find me on X as Deprogrammed Dem.
Nice. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you. Yeah. God bless.